Good morning, everyone.
Sorry, Diana, I realized that I just said that as well, muted. How are you doing?
Well, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. It was good seeing everybody the other day. That was a good meeting.
It was so nice.
You left right after. I looked for you, but I didn't see you. Did you go to the food truck?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to catch up with you.
Did a lot of people go?
Yeah, we had a lot of people stick around. I think everyone felt excited to reconnect and hear what was going on. So I would love to have more of those meetings in person. All right. I'm just kicking out the AI note takers. Sorry, everyone. Okay, let me pull up our presentation. We'll just give it one more minute for folks to join. But those who are already here, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name and your organization. We'll do roll call for the distribution and access voting members shortly. And just so everyone knows, this call is being recorded and will be posted to the council's website as soon as possible. Okay, well, so I am Annika Lefebvre. I am the Resilience Program Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And this is the Distribution and Access Committee call that happens every month. I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague Piper Kohlenberger, who is going to be kind of the MC for today's meeting, but I will help with roll call. Piper, are you ready to do this? And you should introduce yourself.
Yes. Yeah, as Annika said, I'm Piper Kohlenberger. I'm an Emerson Hunger Fellow with the Congressional Hunger Center that's been placed with MDEM for 6 months for my field site placement, and I've been working with Annika and the FSRC for that time. So this is my first time sort of facilitating this type of call. And so all of you guys have been here for longer than I have and like have more subject specific knowledge than I do. So if I say anything that's not correct or is something that you guys have spoken about before, like please just stop me and let me know. And bear with me as we do this meeting. So yeah, first we'll have welcome from the committee co-chairs. So I'll turn it over to Lisa and LaMonica for that.
Lisa, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I just, welcome to everyone. I appreciate everyone joining, especially in this like really busy and hectic time. I know as FSRC, we had met last week in person and it was a really fabulous meeting. So it's really great to kind of continue that dialogue and continue that discussion. So welcome, and I'll pass it to LaMonica.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I just want to share in Lisa's comments. It was really good to be in person with you all. Last week was really good just to have an opportunity to kind of step back from our screens and to just think collectively in person. So for those that I met for the first time, it was a pleasure meeting you and really looking forward to continuing the work. I know this year has been really heavy and we've been fighting against a lot of changes, but I really appreciate all the work, and I know Lisa does as well, We all just really appreciate the hard work and commitment despite some of the obstacles that we continue to face and everything that you all have done this year, and really looking forward to wrapping up with this meeting as well as looking forward into 2026. And I'll pass it back to you, Piper.
So I'm actually going to immediately pass it to Annika for roll call.
We'll make it quick. And bear with me. So I'm just going to call the names of the committee members who are voting members. You know that Lisa and LaMonica are here. Beth Brewster, did I see you? I think I saw Beth. Delegate Charkoudian. Erin Fedor. Anne Marie Hart, bookbinder.
Here.
Anne Marie. Joe Liu. I think I saw you, Joe.
Here.
Nancy Nunn said she was going to be joining us a little late. Leah Paley is here.
I'm here. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Mary Salins is here.
Here.
Teresa Stahl, I saw.
Yes, here.
Diana. I can take the role without even calling your names. I'm sorry. And Ann Wallerstedt is here too.
Just popped in.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Piper, you got this.
Awesome. Okay, so for announcements, we just have sort of a spread of meetings coming up. Next few meetings from Communication and Coordination Committee meetings is January 14th. So in the new year, that'll be split between Local Food Council Collaborative from 12 to 1 p.m. and Food System Legislation, which is 1 to 2 p.m. Next for Distribution and Access is January 15th, 9:30 to 10:30. For Environment and Production, we have January 15th, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And also later today. And for the next FSRC meeting, it's February 5th, 2025, 10 to 12 p.m. So let's get into the healthy food retail discussion. For some background, would you mind switching to the next slide, Annika? Thank you. For the background of what that sort of entails, in September, the council heard from Dr. Joel Gittleson from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And what they sort of talked about was healthy corner and convenience stores in Baltimore City. And also in that same call from Rial Carver from Kansas State University Rural Grocery Store Initiative. And that conversation was around the sustainability and profitability of rural independent grocery store retailers. And moving on to October, there were 3 presenters on this call. Mara Shi from the Maryland Department of Health talked about WIC vendor compliance. Ricky Travers was a local grocery store owner of Simmons Center Market and talked about the barriers that he faced in sort of maintaining profitability and participating in nutrition assistance programs. And last but not least, we also had Gina Plato-Nino from FRAC to talk about the key challenges of citing grocery stores and also for just grocery stores operating in healthy food priority areas.
I'll turn it to the next one. Sorry about that.
No worries. And so sort of what we want to discuss today, or what we want the council to discuss today, is how the Distribution and Access Committee can promote grocery retail and healthy food priority areas, what recommendations you all think would address like key issues here. And yeah, so I'll turn it over to you all to hear what thoughts you all have on this topic. Joe.
Well, I don't know if we can take any credit for it, but the governor made a couple announcements yesterday at an event in East Baltimore, including opening up a new program called Nourish Maryland with an RFP that we'll start accepting proposals January 20th for, it's a $2 million pool with grants up to $150,000 for retail in their definition of food priority areas. And I think did I see Karen yesterday at the event too? I don't.
Hi, Joe. Yes, we were there
Yeah.
because our Maryland Market Money folks.
You should probably talk about it. So you were there too.
Yeah, it was a great event. And so Maryland Market Money is working with DHCD on this program. So we're doing, actually it's a joint effort, which we're really excited to be working with DHCD on this whole thing. So those farm stands and farmers markets that are in the priority areas, they'll receive consideration if they apply to this particular grant. So yeah, it's very exciting, and we're happy to be there. And I was talking to some of your colleagues there yesterday, Joe.
Shannon, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up to Karen and Joe on this. Maryland Department of Environment's office is located down by M&T Bank Stadium, and on my own personal drive home, I drive up through Fulton Avenue, and I happen to notice that there is a new community refrigerator located at one of the urban farms that's located there. And of course, on the coldest day of the year, I pulled off the side of the road to have a conversation with them on it because it was new. I noticed it. And one, they were not aware of anything related to the Food System Resiliency Council, which, I can understand. But two, they really aren't aware of any financial benefits. And this is an urban farm located at an established urban farm that provides free nutrition meals to a high, food priority area, a healthy food priority access area. And I was just wondering, what are ways in which the state, whether it's Department of Environment, Department of Agriculture, can provide more information to these smaller urban farms that exist that are not a retail establishment, but are really providing these valuable resources to those entities, and that they understand how to obtain this support to gain funding, whatever it might be. Because I asked about the fridge and they said they had to pay for the electrical connection. And of course, my head, Stephanie, I can see that you're on this call, but I was like, wait, what about solar? So I was just curious of how we can provide more information to areas where there is not the strength and foot traffic that maybe Montgomery County or Prince George's County have.
That's a really good point, Shannon, because my brain is like, well, let's see, like in our conservation area, right? Because we have our urban ag program, right? But then also with our Maryland Market Money, because I know we have a list of the small and mid-sized urban farms throughout the state, but then also using that information, because we use them as a food access point for the Maryland Market Money, but then also letting them know, that, these funding sources are available. And, and all the farmers that we have, that we know of that are doing this kind of work, because we also have like a Maryland's Best newsletter, right? And so we constantly put information about what is available in that newsletter. And hopefully, if they read it, that's one, that's always the, whether or not they're going to read this information. That's always the challenge, right? Because everyone's so busy.
LaMonica?
Shannon, I was just wondering, so part of what you're mentioning, I think sometimes it just happens by word of mouth. Like, I'm new to this, I just don't know. So I'm relying on the people that pull off to the side of the road that are going to be willing to have these conversations. And that's usually how a lot of this, in my experience, it comes about. But I wonder if this is the reason for greater support around our local food councils, where, Karen, to your point, like, we have state agency information, but the state agency can't be everywhere in every county and every local jurisdiction. But that's the point of our local food councils. And so I'm wondering, and just that quickly, I forgot where you said this particular community refrigerator was, but if our local food councils and supporting them, if this is a way, we get a list of these urban farms, or even just as they pop up, because people are wanting to do a lot of things on their own. And this came up during our lunch conversation last week. A lot of folks are wanting to do things on their own in a silo, in a vacuum. And it's like, I'm not doing this because I want the state or the county to pay for it. I'm doing it because there's just a need in our community. But I'm just wondering if that is a space for us to really look into supporting our local food councils, and if this person is connected to a food council that is within their vicinity.
To answer that question, I happen to know that they're not really all that connected to it. I did ask that question. I was very frank in asking all the questions.
Nancy, let's hear from you. I'm not sure that we can hear you, Nancy. At least I can't.
Nancy, you're on mute.
Let's go to Lisa and come back to Nancy.
Kind of piggybacking off of what LaMonica said in regards to local food councils, and thinking through kind of healthy retail, kind of things that potentially local food councils could really work with current retailers that are out there. I think both hearing from kind of FRAC and WIC was, kind of some of the logistical or barriers or issues with both, kind of either signing up for WIC or kind of thinking through some of the stocking things with WIC. So kind of tech, and then EBT. So some of those technical assistance things. So really ensuring that all of the small retailers in especially rural areas, but also in the urban areas, are able to have those programs. And so I think that, is one kind of thing that food councils could help, kind of think through as a priority. The other I thought was really interesting. We only had one local grocer that was from Simmons Market. And he seemed really committed to local food, but his method for doing it was really like boots on the ground. Like he knew the farmers, he knew the seasonality, he knew what his customers wanted. And so that actually really showed a commitment and a dedication to having local food. And so I'm not sure if every single owner of a small retail would have that both dedication, but also connections, knowledge of seasonality, he was like, oh, I dial up this farmer and I ask for like collard greens. And, he knew what his customers wanted and what would sell. And so I think that piece of it, if we want really local food, is making those connections so they know what farmers, they know, seasonality, and kind of potentially what customers would want. And the last that I thought was super fascinating, which is linking through, is all of the cost of electricity. That was, was a huge barrier for the local retailer to stay in business. And so I'm unsure as much how, local food councils could help figure out, any of the taxing, but he said he had, replaced things or gotten tax credits. But I think that piece of it was an interesting, that with the grocery margins being so small, that was one of his greatest, identified barriers to staying in business, was the cost of electricity. So
Awesome.
I just think, I think there's a lot of help that food councils could do to keep retailers, to be able to have local, have healthy, be able to have benefit programs at them.
Nancy, not sure if the sound issues were able to be resolved, but Nancy in the chat says that she just wants to bring to focus that most of what was being talked about was urban areas, but that she assumes that the RFP that Joe mentioned would be open to all regions. Lindsay.
I was just reminded when Lisa was speaking about a former job I had where we would host these business to business forums and bring all different people throughout the market system that we were working in together to have these market linkages. So I just wondered if sort of an event like that or something is within the realm of something that the committee could facilitate. And obviously would have to do a good job of marketing and planning around seasonality, that farmers are available and things like that. But just something that she her comments jogged my memory about.
Annika?
Thanks, Piper. So I just wanted to add in based on what Lisa was saying about how Ricky Travers mentioned that his utility bills were. It looks like one of the eligible uses for the Nourish Maryland grant program is upgrades for equipment. So that could be something that would be helpful for those businesses. But something that has really stuck with me after this fall's calls have been how amazing the rural grocery initiative was with that Ryle shared with us in September. And I so wish that Maryland had something like that too, like something more specifically targeting like small and independent grocers, maybe not necessarily only in rural areas, but I'm curious if there's something we can do there. I liked what Lindsay said about peer-to-peer support.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? In terms of either peer-to-peer support or more specific grants? Lisa?
I mean, I think Annika is right. I mean, the Kansas program was, really in depth and had thought through both, kind of the local grocer, in addition to there was the health aspect of it. So it was really comprehensive. And it thought through the community, so it was a really community-based model. And so, and kind of the value of a rural grocery store in a community, and that it was, the economic impact of it, the health impact of it, the community aspect. So it was a really grounded model, kind of thinking through just, the intense value of a grocery store in a community. And, of course, like it had an educational component in it too, in addition to it. And so I think that, it was an education of just the participants type of, but it was actually educating, kind of the community and grocers and the technical assistants. And so it was extremely comprehensive with that research base through Kansas State. And so that model was, it was just really fabulous what the work they were doing.
Shannon?
Yeah, I'm just curious, as we think about how to support the smaller entities within the state and how broad the state is and how distributed it is, would it be better to host some sort of these support? Like if the concept associated with this is to develop some sort of programming that provides support to local or regional opportunities, would it be better to host it in a regional forum or a statewide forum? This is something I, as a state agent, I'm always curious and want to hear from everyone's opinion on. How can you support folks at a state level by having, should it be regionally supported or should it be statewide with one, let's say, meeting or workshop?
LaMonica?
So Shannon, I think that's a really good perspective. And I'll just say something that we learned that came up for us when we did our legislative brainstorming was our focus is statewide. But we had a lot of folks that attended for the very first time that were wondering, can we do this regionally? Because what am I looking at in my region that may not necessarily, it's not applicable statewide. Like, of course, I'm in the state of Maryland, but I really want to know at a hyper local level in my region, what do I need to focus on? Who do I need to talk to? What are some of the impacts to the local community? And so I think it's some of the work that I used to do in Georgia, like although we were statewide, we were the state agency, we focused a lot of our work regionally. And that was because though it looks different. It would look different if we're doing something in South Georgia than if we were doing something in North Georgia, than if we were doing something in Atlanta. So I think that's a really good perspective to, if we want to focus on it, to start off regionally and then maybe have just one convening once a year, but just have maybe a couple times a year, more frequent connection points at a regional level. So I do think having something regionally would probably be beneficial to start off first, and then we could think how we could maybe do something, annually, because the benefit of doing something, I'm not annually, the benefit of doing something statewide is that you get to hear the different challenges in different regions, and something may pop up for you that hasn't come up in your particular region, but it could be a lesson learned that came out of another region. But I do like the regional kind of breakup.
All right. So in terms of sort of implementing some of these changes that we're like talking about and some of the like ideas that people have, does anyone sort of immediately see an FSRC recommendation that maybe this could sort of like fit under?
So I will say that Joe kind of hinted at it, but the DHCD grant is remarkably similar to the recommendation the council published over the summer about grocery stores and healthy food priority areas, but we had a stronger WIC participant emphasis, and this grant has a SNAP emphasis. I'm curious, like, if there's anything that the committee can do in the absence of writing more recommendations in the coming calendar year. I heard suggestions about outreach to local food councils, some interest in seeing whether there would be traction for in-person, like, regional convenings. Joe, go ahead.
Just back to the previous discussion, smaller retailers, and I wonder, if we think of farmers markets outside Baltimore and DC metro area, on-farm retail that are far less likely to hear about these kinds of funding opportunities. And I was wondering if there were specific things that we could do to sort of help spread the word and flag their eligibility for this program.
Diana.
I think that goes back to the local food councils. I think as a food council, we should be out spreading the word. And that's one of the things I hope that we do more here in Anne Arundel County. Just also like the Maryland market money, getting them into the farmer stand. I just wish that we could be more active, or maybe we need as a state to provide more training or sharing the information when the food councils do come together, because food councils can only grow if they have the information.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that while it wasn't specifically a recommendation from this committee, the Food Council one in regards to like strengthening capacity is, seems like these items could fall under that strengthening capacity related to, these topics and kind of working across the state with food councils. I do think the recommendation in regards to, local farm products in healthy food priority areas, while it was, as Annika mentioned, it was really targeted for something, I think the idea of retailers, kind of independent of what kind of retailers, having local produce. So, while that one was really specific for, kind of more pop-up type markets, I think the concept of it was really trying to get, more local food in, broader and across the state and more readily available for residents. And so I think so while it's not 100% aligned with, actually established retailers, I do think the kind of the thought, the concept behind it was really, helping to try to do that. So I still think there's some alignment with that.
Karen.
Yeah, this is something similar to what's being discussed, but I will say that what we've seen, like with the farmers market nutrition program, and also with, is that, the farmers are offering the ability for WIC and for seniors, right, to buy local food at the farmers markets, but oftentimes it's, it's challenging for them to get to the farmers markets, right? So we're still struggling with transportation. And it's just also the knowledge, right? Because we were talking a lot about the farmers, but what we're also seeing is like for the WIC moms, getting word to them saying you could go to the farmers market to buy local food and you can use your benefit, right? Because there's still a disconnect there, and trying to get the word out to the WIC moms, and also, the seniors too. The seniors are a little bit more in tune to where they can go, because we had a high redemption rate this year, but still, with regarding the WIC. And so is this something like the food, looking at distribution and access, right? So how can the food policy councils help with that too? Because we can have the farmers markets and we can have the farmers accepting the benefits, but we still need to get the participants to these areas.
Nancy. Sorry, Nancy, I think we can't hear you again. Anyone else have thoughts? Thoughts about how we can get access to residents?
Lindsay put a good, put something in the chat. Could the CSA model help with that challenge as far as transportation?
Yeah. Annika?
Well, this was not what I was going to say, but Teresa put something interesting in the chat about like a WIC funded produce box model. So that could be something to think about. But I guess I was going to say something that feels like an easier lift for us to support the FSRC with is like trying to convene stakeholders and bring people to the table to kind of like build that communication network and get the word out. And I don't know, local food councils do seem like a great way to do that, but I also know that the local food councils are in various states of coordination right now. And so not all of them may be able to like take on additional projects at the moment. What can distribution and access do to advance this and like move on? And Nancy, you have your hand up.
I think Nancy might be having a bit like of a technical difficulty with the sound. So let's go with Karen.
Yes, I was responding to Joe and everybody in the chat. So following up with what Teresa said. So the background with the Garrett growers, it was very successful this year. And we did something innovative. The FMNP program did something innovative, and we received a waiver to do a food box, more or less, lack of a better term, a food box program with WIC, and we decided to go with Garrett growers just because there are multiple farmers in the Garrett grower co-op. And it took a lot of work, I will say, for the WIC folks in Garrett County, but also on the logistics side with Garrett growers too. But since they already had a really great relationship, because I know other WIC agencies across the state, especially in rural areas, are asking about this type of program. It took a lot of coordination. We made a lot of lessons learned, but the redemption rate for WIC, it was maybe around 10%, if that. And because of this food box program, we end up increasing it to over 50%. So that was a huge success. Some of the lessons learned is that folks didn't want to go to a farmer's market, the WIC recipients. They wanted to go to the clinic instead. And so next year we're trying to figure that out of like, how can we get the food boxes to the clinics? There's still a lot of logistics that we're still working, because then, we still want people to go to farmers markets, because that's the whole purpose of the FMNP program. But then, how can we make a hybrid type of solution? And we did have some CSA models in Charles County. We did have a successful CSA model in Charles County this year, working with Schlegel Farms, and that their redemption rate was 100%, which was amazing. But then again, it takes those special people, right? To put in that extra effort to make these items work. And so trying to make it long-term, right, and sustainable, because we're having some really innovative programs and projects that are happening, but it's those key people that make it work. So thank you.
Awesome, yeah. And to pull sort of some of the ideas that have been being said in the chat, Leah sort of brought up the concern that maybe food deserts, or sorry, healthy food priority areas would not be able to be solved without sort of leveling the price playing field for local retailers so that they could compete. And then separately, Nancy has suggested that maybe the council can co-host a webinar with MDA and other stakeholders in order to provide an information session about the new grant. So any thoughts about these two ideas? Leah?
Thanks. More of a question, which is, what can this committee, or more so the council, really do to persuade change at a higher level? Because, what I'm suggesting, and of course, this is like one opinion, although I think probably folks on this call would agree with the opinion of the person who wrote the article I shared. And it's rather lengthy, but I certainly would recommend reading it if it's not something you've read before. If we all agree that really, like, we need to look at this at a systems level, in addition to some of more of these local solutions, what can this council do as far as making a recommendation to our federal elected officials? Maybe there's a champion within the state of Maryland that can promote something, because basically the argument of this article is that this act, which was passed, which still remains in effect, is just not being enforced. And so, is it that we take the stance, if we do our due diligence and agree, yes, this isn't being enforced, and this is really making it hard for independent retailers to exist. I mean, according to this article, it says they went from, I think, closer to 50% of the market share to under 25% and within a couple of decades. So it's interesting. I think there needs to be more of that systems level approach, as well as what we may be able to impact locally. But I was not quite sure what we can really do to make recommendations that go beyond the state.
Yeah, so any, okay, awesome. Lisa?
This is not exactly on that, but it is interesting. When the Kansas State presentation, they actually addressed the fact that they did not only work with independent retailers, they actually worked with dollar stores in rural areas, and so to have healthy foods in it. So it's not a Walmart, or like but in that kind of. But it is interesting that they did target them also as part of their program in rural areas, and so I just thought that was kind of, I think sometimes that's kind of always perceived as a negative, and so but they kind of said that's where people shop, so they were going to try to have healthy foods there.
Awesome. And Shannon.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that while there can be a lot of changes that happen at top level, support at the local level is really where it's going to like make the biggest impact. And I say that because it's the work is being done at a local level, right? Like I, at the state, I'm not actually doing the hands-on distribution of some of this stuff. And so I think that if we support the local level more, right, like actually support, not just dictate. I mean, because again, I'm a regulator, so I do a lot of dictation, but that might be a better avenue. And so if it's about promotion and support to the local level, would there be something that the council can provide either in a pamphlet or a resource that can be provided at the local level in distribution that could maybe amplify some of these opportunities?
Shannon, I think you bring up an excellent point. I think that a lot of times, as being a person that has done direct service, a lot of times we implement things from the top up, and it's not something that people really want or are interested in. So if you start from the bottom and work up, you have more investment.
Thea?
I'm just going to push back and say that if there's no independent retailers to support, then that makes it really difficult to start at the local level. And I think the argument being made in this article, which I keep referring to, is that there's far fewer independent retailers out there as a result of the lack of enforcement of this federal law or act or whatever we want to call it. And so if things keep going down this path, then it's saying from 1982 to 2017, the market share of independent retailers shrank from 53% to 22%. So if we keep trending in that direction, and we have only the thought to start at the local level, then we're not cutting the problem off at its head.
Karen?
Yeah, I have to agree with Leah, because what we're seeing with the grocery stores, there is a lot of consolidation, and I have to look this up because I'm interested in seeing this reading this article, and it's getting more challenging for us, for MDA, because we are, part of what we do with the Maryland's Best program is to work with the grocery stores and to try to get local product into grocery stores. But I will say that it's with the consolidation that's happening, it's challenging to try to get them interested in buying local. So thank you for bringing this up, Leah.
Thank you. We can thank my coworker who shared it with me several months ago. It's really interesting, at least, worth checking out. And it is concerning, with all the consolidation. And I was speaking with Delegate Gary Simmons, who is representing the Brooklyn Park area in Anne Arundel County, and he's on our local food council. And we were speaking about his work to try to bring a retailer into the Brooklyn Park area, which is a healthy food priority area, and that he is like, I'm really struggling. Like, no one wants to come into that area, and that's something, at least at the local level, our organization's looking at, because obviously it's critical to get someone in, but if I'm a independent retailer and I have to pay more than some of these bigger box stores, but none of those box stores want to come in, it just seems like it's an incredible uphill battle to try to get either group, whether small or large, into some of these areas for different reasons.
Yeah, so we've heard some pretty great discussion in the last few minutes about ways that we could help these grocery stores, or like questions about how we could help these grocery stores sort of regain that sort of competitive pricing and what to do to help them. Are there any last thoughts about this or anything else that we've talked about before we move on to our next discussion topic? Annika.
I'm gonna belabor the point a little bit just because I feel like it would be satisfying for me personally if we felt like we had some sort of like tangible next step that the committee wanted to take on this, but maybe that's asking too much. There are so many good ideas shared. Karen.
One question I have, because what is happening up in New York City, right, with this whole concept of public grocery stores. Has the committee looked at this idea and what would make it feasible in Maryland?
Not to my knowledge, but we're also not making new recommendations.
Okay,
Next year.
So this would be considered a new recommendation.
I don't know.
Okay, I was just curious, that's all, because I see it as like grocery retail, right? And given what's going on up in New York City, is that a possibility for the committee to look at or to research? So I know SUNY did a webinar just this past week on the whole concept of public grocery stores and what it would take, just because it's the volume, to lower the prices. As what Leo was saying, is like you need to have the volume in order to get the price points, in order to make to be able to buy the food at a lower price. So that's the challenge.
I think that Leah brought up is a very important factor and very important, but I also want to just add that some of the reasons why local grocery stores are not successful in high priority areas is because of everything else that surrounds it. That was some of the reasons why the grocery stores in Brooklyn Park was not able to stay open.
Annika?
I think, did Lindsay have her hand up before me? Maybe
I
not.
did, but then I was wondering if I was gonna propose something new and we were trying to sort of wrap up the conversation. But I was just thinking I kind of went down a rabbit hole the other day on this topic because I was curious about the Mamdani proposal too, and I found the Kansas program, and then I found that like Instacart has something that they're promoting. And I just wonder if like we're focusing too hard on like an infrastructure solution instead of like we live in this modern era where we have Uber Eats and we have all these other kinds of modalities to get food to people. Because I just think to the point someone just made, maybe Diana, I grew up in a very rural area and the local grocer was all we had when I was a kid, but then, over time, they just couldn't sustain because they couldn't keep the prices down because of the bulk purchasing. And now I'm thinking, here we are, like inflation is skyrocketing. So I can only imagine that is going to continue to persist and be a huge challenge. So I just wonder if there are not some other solutions we should be thinking more about, especially as a global society, we move away from brick and mortar in a lot of spaces.
All great thoughts. I think what I'm hearing with the last few people who spoke is that there's sort of more to think about than just the legality of it, even though that is, obviously a very important thing that we should be considering. There are also some more maybe soft factors that also could be considered, and also lots of different alternatives for how we could tackle the subject. If no one else has anything to add to the conversation, Annika?
I know that we have to move on. I just think that it would be helpful to have a conversation with wholesalers directly, perhaps too, because that was another area that we heard was an issue for independent grocers. And is there like some part of the equation that we're missing by not hearing from those people too? But anyway, Lisa.
No, I mean, I think there's like these larger policy things that are really critical. But then also there's, kind of independent retailers, and then people needing food at this point right now. And so I think kind of making sure that the independent retailers who are open right now that we're providing stuff for. So I think it's like a dual approach, kind of looking at these larger, kind of the things that Leo was mentioning, but also the ones that are already open, trying to ensure that their barriers to stay open or to provide healthy food are being met so that, community members are getting healthy food and that they don't close because there are so many barriers to stay open. And so I think kind of looking at that as a duality, that people in the interim need food, and we want that to be healthy food in addition to access to food. And so looking at both at the same time. So when you're talking about access or action items, I can see both being important, kind of doing, kind of helping people. So the wholesaler idea is great. Like, is there ways to actually help people get food and doing stuff and a variety of different things. So.
Anyone else? Awesome. Okay, so we're going to move on to the discussion about what's next for distribution and access. So basically the question of whether there's any specific recommendations that Distribution and Access Committee would want to prioritize for the rest of fiscal year 2026. So sort of.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but I came off mute. I did the wrong. I was actually going to say in response to if it's okay to answer the question you were just asking about other recommendations, if I interpret you correctly, just something Lindsay and I were looking at recently. Food Bank News puts out a lot of articles that are definitely worth a read, and one was around food as a human right, and believe it might be Honolulu that's looking to pass something, and it looked like maybe the state of Maine passed something. But I wonder if we want to consider that as a future discussion topic in terms of whether this is something that we want to champion and put forth as a state recommendation. What does that mean? What does that mean for the state of Maryland?
Yeah, I think definitely very an interesting discussion. For the upcoming year, I believe the council has decided to sort of focus on recommendations that they've already put forth. And so I think there could be a very interesting discussion about what that looks like in context of the recommendations that have already been written. And then also for future years, like what that might look like in terms of a separate recommendation. But yeah, anyone have particular thoughts about that?
Yeah, good point, Piper.
Diana?
Oh, I put my hand down. I see Annika has her hand up. Go ahead, Annika.
I was just going to piggyback off of what Piper was saying too, and kind of like try to bridge the gap a little bit and suggest, I think that what we've talked about with past recommendations for the council and seeing progress is that the next step doesn't have to like one for one match exactly what the recommendation said in the first place. Like, circumstances have changed, and also, we have to work with the resources that are in front of us. So maybe there are like new things that fit into like old ideas, if that makes sense, or like different approaches that we should be considering for past recommendations.
And I just have to add, I wasn't going to say anything, but I really like food as a human right. And I think that is something we really need to look into a little bit more, because that would stop racial injustice and it would address all of those things. And I just think, Leah, thank you for bringing that up. That's powerful.
Can be part of our Anne Arundel County Food Council roadmap, Diana, at a minimum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please don't forget that, Leah.
I'm on it. And Lindsay says that for Pete's sake, West Virginia did it.
And I do think that could be added to one of the recommendations that we already have as a distribution and access.
Yeah,
Say
great
more about
idea,
that,
Diana.
Diana.
Oops.
What did you say?
I said say more about what you just.
The one that we have in regards to making food available in more high need areas. I don't remember what the recommendation says exactly, but it did say about bringing in, I would have to go back and look, Annika, I don't want to say something and not be right, but I think it would fit under that one.
Does anyone else have thoughts about where that particular idea could fit, or outside of this specific topic, like what recommendations they think are most feasible or would be most effective in sort of quickly reducing food insecurity?
Teresa is on. Teresa, what was the recommendation your team worked on?
I think Teresa popped off earlier.
That's right. She had
Are you
another
talking
meeting.
about the pop-up markets, Diana?
Yes.
Lisa, I think, was also heavily involved in writing that one.
What was the question specifically? Was it?
Is there something, I think, like about food access and like the pop-up markets recommendation that
Yeah, I mean, I think
the
this.
committee can revisit.
Yeah, I mean, I think this intersects so much with the conversation that we were having in regards to both retail and then also with the kind of the grant that just came out. That is, the whole idea of that like really came from, it came from a lot of barriers in regards to it, but that redemption of the benefits at pop-up markets, it made it accessible, it brought it to communities where it was needed, and then the redemption rates were really high. And so it went to when there was that discussion about CSA models, and it's that same concept. It's really identifying areas where people go, congregate, live, eat, learn, and bringing, kind of a pop-up market to them. And so I do think parts of that could be done more locally. So while that was a state recommendation, so this might be an intersection between the local food council's work and that recommendation, is because some of those things might be more county regulations or recommendations in regards to the barriers were really maybe not from the state, but really more, a lot of times we've heard that they're permitting things related to that are more county. So that might be able to intersect those, a local food council and working with them in regards to ways to facilitate those, might intersect those two those two recommendations.
Yeah, so in the chat, I see Annika has suggested maybe a panel discussion with local business development offices, and Shannon has also talked about like an MD food donation guide. Anne Marie?
Yeah, sorry. I have two things, and I apologize because one, I feel a little naive even in suggesting, but just to think about where we want to go, next year. I feel like there are some recommendations. I'm thinking, the one that I was most closely working on with folks about CEP, and I just think about like where are there recommendations where we need to kind of just support keeping what we already had, knowing that, there are changes that have come down that don't let us advance in the way that we were hoping to.